Hello, welcome to today's Vendor Spotlight. My name is Lee Biggenden. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer and co-founder of Nefos Technologies. Joined today by Alan Rosenthal, founder of SecuPi. Welcome, Alan.
Hey,
Thanks for joining us. Now, before we get into it, we'd just like to introduce ourselves slightly in terms of Nefos Technologies, and then we'll hand over to Alan to introduce SecuPi and himself to the audience here today. From our perspective, Nefos is a data services integrator working with UK and global customers, all different shapes and sizes across a couple of core disciplines, really. One is high performance data infrastructure, one is data governance, and the third area is privacy, risk and compliance. And we're working with customers to support them throughout their journey, be that through our professional services team, who are responsible for helping them develop and build strategy roadmaps, implementation plans of the platforms that we recommend, or be that through fully managed services for the items that we recommend as part of our portfolio. Now, SecuPi are one of our strategic partners, and we wanted to take an opportunity really to introduce them and discuss really with Alan their position in the market, and to have Alan share some of their insights on the challenges that customers have within the space. Thanks again for joining us, Alan. As a starting point, if you could introduce yourself and SecuPi to the audience, please.
Sure. Thank you, Lee. My name is Alan Rosenthal, co-founder and CEO of SecuPi. Been doing data privacy for the last 15 years. Dynamic masking, I don't know if you heard about this notion, but dynamic masking is something that I invented about 15 years ago. My first company was acquired by Informatica, and later, 7 years ago, I founded SecuPi, primarily through the frustration of how large organizations are handling data today, right? From the basis of different tooling, the inability to scale those tools to address the requirements of protecting data. And of course, meeting Lee and the team made a lot of sense, as Nefos is also doing this data protection, compliance, risk management, addressing large organization journey from today's state to a compliant state. Thank you for allowing us to present to you today.
No, we're really pleased to have you. To give it a little bit of context as to why we felt SecuPi was a good partner from our perspective, there were two core elements, you just touched on them there, that really drew us towards SecuPi as a platform. Now, the first was around access control, and I think most, if not all, organizations want to make their data more available, more widely available to their teams, really with the goal of helping them enable value creation. They want to drive more value from the data assets that they've got, but in order to do that, they need to be more available. But in order to make them available, that needs to be done in a controlled and secure way. And historically, RBAC was the model for that. But it doesn't really give you the level of fine-grained control that our customers are asking for today. So that was a key piece for us. And the second part was around the ability to provide more automated remediation and control over the data. So whether that's deletion, whether it's anonymization, whatever it may be. But those two things were critical for us, as well as the integration that the team at SecuPi have built in with some of our other partners, like Big ID, as an example. So I guess, Alan, from your perspective, it'd be great to understand those things from a SecuPi perspective. Sure. If you could just talk to some of the core challenges that you guys are experiencing your customers and that you're solving for, that would be really useful for the guys, I'm sure.
Sure. Thank you. So by design, SecuPi is my next evolution stage. A lot of lessons learned by serving notable organizations from the likes of the largest financials, such as UBS, Credit Suisse, private banks, but also Vodafone, Liberty Global, Groupama, AXA, and many more. Those customers need a solution that will provide an overarching capabilities to solve their life cycle of the data, right? From the creation of the data, as it is being handled and accessed by different stakeholders, whether this is privileged users, DBA, developers, onshore, but also nearshore and offshore, to the analysts that are trying to really get the gist of the data to provide innovation of the future, as well as business users, customer sales reps that also have access to the data through applications. And the reason we founded SecuPi was to provide one tool that will provide an overarching capabilities from the monitoring, who's accessing the data, to the ABAC, to the attribute-based access control, the evolution of the RBAC, the old role-based, now with privacy, sovereignty, geofencing requirements, data sharing agreements. We need to apply access on a need-to-know basis, and hence transforming from the old RBAC, role-based access control, to a multidimensional decision-making through the user, the role, the location, the citizenship, the customer consent, the geolocation, right? Turning the RBAC, which was only one-dimensional based on the role, into an ABAC, adding more attributes as required, into the realm of even the identification of data. So masking, dynamic masking, physical masking, and even deletion that we are doing with our partners, Nefos/Big ID, applying deletion, logical deletion, and physical deletion, helping our customers to comply with ever-growing the evolution of privacy and sovereignty requirements. We have built a platform using those 3 layers, and they include first and foremost monitoring, right? As a basis of what is called protection in depth, right? The defense in depth notion of the zero trust. It all starts with real-time monitoring. Who has access to the data? Then the question of why needs to be addressed. And with the why comes also the responsibility to restrict access on a need-to-know basis through this ABAC model. And on top of that, the identification. All of those capabilities are built in one platform, in the SecuPi platform, supporting, again, the most notable brands in Europe, but also worldwide, to provide the risk reduction that our customers are required to have. And this is applied through different personas, right? From the persona of the privileged users, DBA, developers, then the persona of the analyst, the data scientist, and then the persona of even the business users, as you can see here, right? A very broad platform support that is provided to comply with the regulations through those different personas, right? And the idea to do it with one platform that is there to scale both on-prem and cloud provides the level of risk reduction our customers required. Few notable examples. This is one of the top European bank has deployed SecuPi to address numerous use cases around ABAC, from the privileged users connecting with VDIs, jump servers, through CyberArk, to thousands of different databases. SecuPi was quickly deployed there to provide this accessibility compliance. Also deployed SecuPi on different data mesh platforms, Denodo, Starburst, Trino, Tableau, Power BI, Click, as well as even on a few business applications that more restricted access was required, especially as they are serving also customers in Singapore, in Indonesia, in China, in Japan. They had also to deploy SecuPi on a couple of business applications to provide these fine-grained controls on addressing the sovereignty of their clients. That's one example of a notable customer. Another one is Liberty Global, deployed SecuPi on a bunch of direct DB tools accessed by onshore, nearshore, and offshore teams spread across the world as they need to provide production support, DBA services by different teams to thousands of databases. SecuPi was quickly deployed there on their direct DB tools to address the offshore, nearshore compliancy requirements, dynamically masking access to European customer data at scale, but also the ability to apply encryption. And this is an example of Telefonica uses SecuPi to encrypt sensitive data as it is being loaded to the GCP environment, ensuring the data is never in clear text in the cloud. And similar to that is a Swiss private bank that was compelled to ensure the data is always encrypted as they're lifting data to Snowflake environments. And with the SecuPi technology, we're able to ensure the regulator, the Swiss regulator, the data is always encrypted in Snowflake, and the data can never be decrypted by the Snowflake counted mean based in the US. So all of these are few examples of how SecuPi is being deployed in large organizations with a very, very extensive platform that requires, by the way, no code changes to the applications, no database agents on the databases, and no network configurations to the network. So really a platform that can scale, and that's how we are serving those notable customers.
And I guess that last point, the zero change to the infrastructure piece is key, right? Particularly at scale. And I guess that's probably one of the things that makes SecuPi stand out from the crowd. Are there any other key things that really make SecuPi stand out? There are other approaches out there, I'm sure, from be that in this example, Snowflake's native encryption capabilities or what have you. What's the benefit that SecuPi gives you across that piece?
Sure. So the two main elements start from the broad functionality, right? Providing both the monitoring, the ABAC, and the encryption. So going over and beyond any tool in the market. And the second one is this no-code implementation that you provide, which in the example of Snowflake for the Swiss bank, it is simply deploying a transparent gateway in front of Snowflake. The transparent gateway is configured in the customer VPC, complete segregation of duties with the cloud admins. And the segregation of duties allows us to ensure the regulator, the CISO, the compliance, and the chief privacy officer, the data is always encrypted in Snowflake because Snowflake account admin can never decrypt the data. The keys are not there, and also the decryption function is not there. So the two main elements are the broadness of the platform from functionality perspective and the ability to weave those enforcers into the existing infrastructure, on-prem and cloud. In an example of, for Snowflake, this is simply by deploying transparent gateways that allow the segregation of duties while ensuring compliancy with no code changes, no views, no changes to the reports, etc., etc. But also, when you look at the example of Liberty, when we've done the encryption, similar use case, when we talk even about to increase the posture on application, we have these no-code agents that we deploy on those applications, completely transparent to the end users and to the databases. We simply put a jar file or a DLL on the DirectDB tools or on your Java-based applications, and those enforcers, as we call them, apply those controls. So it can be like in this example where we deployed SecuPi on a couple of business applications in Vodafone, applying restrictive access to customer data to adhere the right to be forgotten and attribute-based access control on a bunch of applications that Vodafone has developed. And this was done by simply putting a jar file on their Java applications. So both the what and the how is very important because existing approaches of simply require a single line of code or invoking an API. And when you hear API, when you hear one line of code, walk away because nobody is going to change your applications. Developers have no capacity to even change one line of code or call an API. Our approach is zero code and super critical for our customer base because they are able to deploy that successfully without going into a sprawl with code changes, network changes, etc. So the only approach to embed an enterprise-wide solution is with this no-code approach that SecuPi has been innovating over the last 7 years.
Yeah, and I think for me, the other two things that really stand out, that you touched on it a couple of times, and I guess it's probably one of those things that to a certain extent you take for granted because you've built it, like you've built the platform this way, but the ability to cover on-prem and cloud in one place, I think is a massive win. I think too many customers are struggling with point platforms that will work with one or the other and not both, and actually it just opens up risk, really, And obviously that's clearly inherent in the thoughts that you had when you developed the platform in the first place.
Yeah. Yes. And this is how we differentiate ourselves from alternatives, right? So if you look at DAM, right, database activity monitoring, the legacy Imperva and Guardium, they're like buying a Nokia for Christmas, right? Too old, require database agents, and in the cloud, they require you to turn on the native database logs, which incur huge cost to your solution. Our solution does it without everything, without turning on native database logs, without database agents, and using the cloud native capabilities to really monitor access to sensitive data and to report upon that. That's from the DAM perspective. Masking solutions, deletion solution, we provide both the physical masking and the logical deletion for right to be forgotten, a very cool innovation that we have used to help AXA, Groupama, other notable customers achieve GDPR without touching their mainframes and their databases. Because what we do is we simply put the SecuPi agent on the application that acts as a filtering mechanism. Here we have a beautiful integration with Big IT, DISA reports, and with OneTrust. SecuPi is getting a feed from Big ID or OneTrust to apply deletion, and SecuPi enforces the deletion on hundreds of databases, hundreds of applications with, again, no changes to the code. And ABAC doing that with no code changes, also a very important innovation that helps our customer to comply. So all of these, that's how we also compare ourselves with the legacy solutions in the past with reduced cost and faster efficiency of scale.
Yeah, and I think, again, like you touched on a couple of points there, when you look at the likes of Big ID, OneTrust, being able to link that policy directly to the data assets themselves and their classification, rather than just taking a blanket policy across everything, is I think critical to making this stuff work at scale as we become more federated, as we want broader access to the data sets. So I think that's really important for our customers when they're looking at doing these things, as well as the ability to automate, right? I think most companies have got less resource than they would like to do these things. Whatever we can do to automate the process has got to be a positive, I would say.
Sure. And one picture worth 1,000 words. This is the output today in our customers, right? So people accessing their databases, running reports, or accessing information from their application screens, the enforcement of access on a need-to-know basis, that's what it means, right? That the customer data, Swiss clients, clients who have stopped to be served, right, after retention period, we can simply X them out. The data is not exposed anymore. So your CEO salary can be X'd out. Their family information, peer employee information of DBAs, offshore, is X'd out. Right? This is eventually what we want to achieve, because if you think about GDPR and its, other sons and daughters from the CIPRA and PDPA and LGPD, and also Schrems 2 and DORA, right? The privacy regulations and the solvency requirements, they're all saying the same thing, access on a need-to-know basis. Access on a need-to-know basis means that accessibility to your customer data, to your crown jewels, to your employee salary information, to your vendor information is done on a need-to-know basis. And eventually in SecuPi, we can simply hide, exit out, encrypt it, or delete it in order to have a quick compliancy at the pace that organizations require, and to the persona in scope, and to the environments that needs to be addressed. The privileged users through the directory tools, the applications, maybe Tableau and Click and Power BI in Snowflake or Redshift, or maybe still on your Teradata that is part of your liability and risk posture that you need to address now. An example, a couple of customers reached out to us recently on SAS, right? This very incumbent platform used by many financials. They still require now to apply even encryption and access control on SAS running on Teradata. As Lee, you mentioned, the need to address that both on-prem and through the cloud transformation at scale, performance is very important. And eventually, if one picture worth 1,000 words, this is the picture I want you to remember, the ability to identify data on a need-to-know basis based on this ABAC notion. based on the role, the location, the device, the citizenship, and the purpose of accessing the data. That's exactly what SecuPi provides at scale.
That's great. And I guess looking a bit further forward, and I'm going slightly off piece here.
Sure.
Are you, when we look at why people are leveraging SecuPi, you've given us some really good examples there. Do you see, obviously with the recent sort of US-UK data bridge piece coming through, obviously we've got GDPR, we've got CCPA, right. We've got all of these things, right? And it's only going to get broader. Have you had any customers yet? And the answer might be no, I don't know. Talk to you about the kind of UK-US data bridge. Is that kind of a concern? Because you mentioned sovereignty a few times.
Right. Yes. So
where do you see that going?
Yeah. Look, Schrems 2 has made a huge impact on cloud transformation. Okay. People understand that now when they leave data to cloud, the cloud account admins, even though you bring your key, right, it's basically useless. Right? The huge breach that happened in a few notable banks recently articulate that even if you bring your key, it doesn't really hold the data back from the cloud admins, from the people who are allowed to see the data decrypted. So it's not who uses the key or where the key or how the key are managed. It's really the question is who can see the data in clear text? That's a question you need to answer. And regulators, through the Sovereignty Acts and the European US discussions around protecting of data, regulators all across Europe, telco regulators in Germany, the UK, financial regulators, DORA, right, another incarnation of sovereignty laws of Schrems 2, they started to ask the hard questions. And by the way, Snowflake and BigQuery and Redshift and the cloud, they call us when they meet smart CISOs, when they meet smart chief data officers, because they would ask the right question, which is, who can see the data in clear text, right? They don't ask, where's the keys, right? Because the key is just, it's a means for the purpose. Because it's like having a beautiful door in your house, but giving everybody access to the data, right? Yeah, I'm managing the key in a secret place, but everybody gets access to the key. So we start to see that, hence the use case in Telefonica, where the German telco regulator is really pushing and preventing access, preventing the lifting of sensitive data to cloud. We see that all the time. We think it's going to be a huge theme in 2024 when those smart CISOs, smart regulators, they will ask the hard questions. And when they ask those hard questions, the only solution in the market today is really what we do. Because in SecuPi, we are able both to encrypt the data before it goes to cloud through our agents on Informatica, Golden Gate, Talent, Kafka, NiFi, etc., etc. So we would identify the data, encrypt it before it goes to cloud. The data in the cloud is always encrypted, and the only time it is being decrypted is through the SecuPi enforcers, through our gateway, through our agents that are outside, that are complete segregation with the cloud admins. So they have no access to the decryption functionality. And this is the solution that we offer now to our notable customers, the ability to encrypt the data before it goes to cloud, and then decrypt it completely outside of the cloud, whether this is on your Tableau, on Power BI, on Qlik, on your native cloud application, running on your Lambda, or your Azure functions, right? Your Spring Boot, etc. So the ability to segregate the encryption and the decryption operation completely from the cloud, that's the evolution of those requirements coming, and they will come in a much stronger pace in 2024 as breaches are continuously happening, right? And they're happening because access to the clear test data is there. So hard questions are going to be asked by smart customers, and when they are being asked to the cloud, right, there's no other solution.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's one of those things where the regulators are being more aggressive at kind of identifying and finding people. I think the individuals, the consumers themselves are more aware of what's happening with their data. than ever before, which I think has a massive impact on that as well. And I agree with you. And I think when you look at the economic climate as well, and the fact that most organizations, certainly that we talk to, are under-resourced in this area, in security and governance, in privacy, actually being able to automate that at scale without using a multitude of tools to do it, and being able to consolidate that down is going to be a real big thing for people, I think, moving forward. So I guess we're running close to time now. I've got one last question for you, if you don't mind, Alon, and we covered quite a lot of ground. But I guess if you took your SecuPi hat off for a second, maybe, if you were giving a customer a piece of advice in terms of if they're embarking on a journey to move in this direction, move to zero trust, all of the things that we touched on today, what advice would you give them going into that sort of program? If you could pick one, that's probably a lot.
Sure. Yeah. I think the biggest advice is simply to outline the data risk, right, with two dimensions: the persona that we want to start with. Maybe it's the developers, the DBAs, the cloud admins. Maybe it's some few critical applications. Maybe it's the analyst, the data scientist, and how they are accessing the data, the RegDB tools, maybe through Power BI or Tableau, or a few critical applications, and start there. Right? And not be tempted to go through a vendor talk, that we look at it from a feature perspective and not from a business and risk perspective. Right? You need to, once you identify the personas and the accessibility to the data, then look who can provide you the breadth of options. And of course, those options will require the monitoring, the access control, and the identification of the data. And that's important, because what happens is that many customers go to a vendor and the vendor will sell them a masking tool, or a vendor will sell them a Snowflake access control, right? And what happens eventually is that they're not solving and not providing the means to address the entire journey, the 10-year journey that the customers will have to take, as more solvency requirements, more privacy needs are there, even breach risks are increasing all the time. By looking at that and understanding the personas and the tools that they are using, and finding the right vendor to address the different risks through the lens of who has access to the data, monitoring that, restricting that on a need-to-know basis, and identifying that by design through encryption and masking. I think this is the right approach, because then it will allow you to really evaluate the tools out there and how they can fit your environment and your journey, both through time with new regulations and through the life cycle of the data, from its creation on the operational systems to its consumption and to its deletion and shifting to non-prod environments. I think this is the right way for customers to think of how to address their data solutions over time, and how to have the right partner. And that's why we partner, of course, with Nephos, because they have the right viewpoint on the challenge from an implementation, from a tooling perspective. And now with our superarching platform that can provide the means to do that, I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, I agree. And we here at our teams here are big on it. There are normally two things we advise people not to do, which is go and buy a tool before you know what you're trying to deliver, or buy purely on the technical element of it, when, as you say, you need to understand what you're driving at and where you're trying to drive the value and what you need before you get into that mess. So that's always cool and critical for our guys. And also the other piece is always around try not to do it too big too soon. You have to, it's one of those things, isn't it? We try and, if you imagine the vast quantity of applications and services that are ran in a large scale enterprise, you can't do that in one go. It's impractical. You have to start sensibly and typically smaller, and then expand out from there. And I think they're two key things that we see with our customers for sure. But no, that's great. I really appreciate your time today, Alan. Thank you. Really good insights, and no doubt the audience will appreciate those. In terms of, if you'd like to learn more about the team at SecuPi, then you can visit them online. You can get in touch with our guys, and I'm sure someone from our team will be more than happy to give you an introduction into the platform and what they're able to achieve. Or you can visit SecuPi directly on secupi.com, and there's a ton of resource and video content and things on there. Big thank you to Alon, and thank you for listening today.